This is Tristan da Cunha, a tiny speck of rock and fire sitting alone in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, roughly 2,400 kilometers from the nearest land in South Africa, and nearly 3,400 kilometers from South America. This is the most remote, permanently inhabited island on the entire planet Earth. And only 240 people call this island home. And that raises some questions that most people never think to ask. Who are these 240 people? Why do they choose to live here, and how do they survive? To understand why 240 people live on the most remote island on Earth, we need to go back, way back, to a time when this island didn't even exist. Millions of years ago, deep beneath the South Atlantic Ocean, something was brewing. Volcanic activity on the ocean floor was slowly pushing rock and lava upward, eruption after eruption, layer after layer, until one day, land broke through the surface of the water. That is how Tristan da Cunha was born. Not discovered, not built, literally created by fire from beneath the sea. For thousands of years, this island sat completely alone. No humans, no animals, just volcanic rock, wind, and ocean. The first human to ever see it was a Portuguese explorer named Tristão da Cunha in 1506. He spotted the island during a voyage but never actually set foot on it. The seas were too rough. He simply named it after himself and sailed on. The island returned to silence. For the next 300 years, nothing. No one came, no one stayed. The world simply had no reason to care about a volcanic rock in the middle of nowhere. Then came 1816, and everything changed. Britain had just defeated Napoleon and was keeping him exiled on St. Helena, another remote island in the South Atlantic. Worried that France might use Tristan da Cunha as a base to rescue Napoleon, Britain officially claimed the island and sent a small military garrison to occupy it. But when Napoleon died in 1821, Britain decided the island was no longer worth the cost. They packed up and left. Almost everyone left. One man stayed behind, a Scottish corporal named William Glass. He had fallen in love with the island. He believed a simple, self-sufficient life could be built here. So he made a deal with two stonemasons who also chose to stay, and together they drew up a small charter, a basic agreement to share the land and work equally. William Glass is considered the founding father of Tristan da Cunha. He had a wife from St. Helena, and together they began having children. But 3 men alone on an island is not a community. They needed more people. Over the following decades, the island slowly gathered souls in the most unlikely ways. Shipwrecks brought some. Sailors whose vessels were destroyed by the brutal South Atlantic storms would wash ashore, and some of them simply stayed. Other women were brought from St. Helena. Some chose to come, seeking a new life. Others had very little choice in the matter. Their names are part of the island's history too. Martha, Mary, and others who became the mothers of Tristan da Cunha. Then came more settlers. A few American whalers, an Italian sailor named Andrea Repetto, a Dutchman named Peter Green. Each one arrived by accident or by choice, and each one added their bloodline to this tiny, growing community. By the mid-1800s, the population had grown to a small but real community, and it was made up of exactly 7 core families. The Glasses, the Greens, the Repettos, the Swains, the Rogersons, the Lavarellos, and the Hagans. 7 families. That is it. And here is the extraordinary part. Almost every single one of the 240 people living on Tristan da Cunha today is a direct descendant of these 7 families. The same 7 names still dominate the island today, centuries later. These people did not just settle an island, they became the island. Completely isolated, completely self-reliant, they built a community from nothing. Fishing, farming, raising cattle, surviving storms, and living by a code of equality that William Glass first wrote down in 1817. They had no reason to stay. The world was out there. And yet, generation after generation, they stayed. 7 families, a community built from nothing, a life of complete isolation. But that isolation was about to become something far more dangerous. Because in 1914, the world went to war, and Tristan da Cunha would pay a price it never deserved to pay. Every year without fail, a British supply ship would make the long voyage to Tristan da Cunha. It was the island's only connection to the outside world. Medicine, salt, tools, clothes, seeds, things the islanders could not produce themselves. And just as importantly, news, letters. A reminder that the rest of the world still knew they existed. That ship was everything. And then in 1914, World War I began. Britain had bigger things to worry about. Ships were needed for war, resources were stretched, and somewhere in the chaos of one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, a tiny volcanic island was simply forgotten. The supply ship stopped coming. 1 year passed, no ship. 2 years, nothing. 3, 4, 5 years. Silence. The islanders had no radio, no way to send a message, no way to ask for help. They did not even fully understand what was happening in the outside world. All they knew was that the ship had stopped coming, and they were completely on their own. So they did what the people of Tristan da Cunha have always done. They survived. They fished harder. They rationed everything. They grew what they could. They repaired their tools with whatever materials they had left. When medicine ran out, they relied on whatever natural remedies they knew. When clothing wore thin, they made do. But here is something that tells you everything about how this community functioned during those dark years. They had no money, so they invented their own: potatoes. On Tristan da Cunha, potatoes became the official currency of the island. If you needed something, a tool repaired, help building a roof, a favor from a neighbor, you paid in potatoes. Goods were traded in potatoes. Labor was valued in potatoes. The entire economy of the island ran on a vegetable they grew in the ground. It sounds unusual, but think about it. On an island completely cut off from the world, with no shops and no supply ships, potatoes were the one thing everyone grew, everyone needed, and everyone understood the value of. It was a perfect system for a community built entirely on equality and mutual survival. And it worked. But survival came at a cost. These were hard, brutal years. With no outside medicine, illness became far more dangerous. With no new supplies, everyday life became a constant struggle. The community grew tighter out of necessity. Every single person depended on every other person just to get through each day. And still, no ship came. It was not until 1919, after the war ended, that the outside world finally remembered Tristan da Cunha existed. When the supply ship finally arrived after nearly a decade of absence, the islanders who came down to the shore to meet it had aged. Some familiar faces were gone forever, and yet not one person had left. Not one family had given up. They were still there. The world had forgotten them, but they had not forgotten who they were. They survived a decade of silence. They survived being forgotten by the entire world. But nothing could have prepared them for what was coming next. Because in 1961, the island itself turned against them. It was the 10th of October, 1961. Just an ordinary day on Tristan da Cunha. Fishermen out at sea, women tending to their homes, children playing near the shoreline. And then, the ground began to shake. A new volcanic eruption was breaking open right behind the settlement. Not from the main volcano peak above, but from a fresh vent, cracking open at the base, right where the people lived. Rocks came flying, the earth split, and a massive wall of lava began slowly pushing toward the village. For the first time in their entire history, the islanders had no choice. They had to leave. Every single person on Tristan da Cunha, all 264 of them at the time, was evacuated. They grabbed what little they could carry, boarded ships, and watched their island disappear behind them into the ocean. Most of them had never left Tristan da Cunha in their entire lives. Some had never even seen a city. And now they were being taken to one of the biggest and busiest cities on Earth. London. Can you imagine that? People who had spent their whole lives fishing, farming, living in complete silence and isolation, suddenly dropped into 1960s London. The noise, the traffic, the crowds, the concrete. Everything was foreign. Everything was overwhelming. The British government housed them in a former RAF base in Hampshire. They were given modern homes, running water, electricity, things they had never had on the island, and the world expected them to adapt, to settle in, to become modern British citizens. But something unexpected happened. They hated it. Not because they were ungrateful, but because Tristan da Cunha was not just where they were from, it was who they were. The simplicity, the community, the fishing, the open land, the silence. No amount of television or central heating could replace that. They missed home. Meanwhile, back on the island, scientists were monitoring the volcano, and within a year the eruption had settled. The lava had stopped. The island was still there, damaged, but alive. So in 1963, the British government gave the islanders a choice, a vote. Do you want to stay in Britain or go back? The result was almost unanimous. They wanted to go back. The British government was shocked. Officials tried to discourage them. Journalists called it madness. Why would anyone choose to return to a remote volcanic island with no airport, no hospital, no modern conveniences over life in England? But to the islanders, the answer was simple. That island was their home. So in 1963, the people of Tristan da Cunha sailed back across the South Atlantic, back to their volcanic island, back to the life that the rest of the world could never understand. They rebuilt everything from scratch, and they stayed. But what about today? The wars are over, the volcano is quiet. So what does life actually look like on Tristan da Cunha in the modern world? Today, life on Tristan da Cunha is simple but complete. The islanders still fish the same waters their ancestors fished, with crayfish being the island's main export and primary source of income. Every family still grows their own potatoes and vegetables, raises cattle, and lives almost entirely off the land and sea. There are no supermarkets, no restaurants, no malls, just a small post office, a cafe, and a handful of community-run services. The economy is tiny but stable, built on fishing, local government jobs, crayfish exports, and, surprisingly, the sale of postage stamps, which are highly sought after by collectors around the world. Healthcare is perhaps the biggest challenge. There is only one doctor on the entire island, and any serious medical emergency means a days-long evacuation by sea. Children are educated at the small local school, but for higher education, they must travel all the way to the UK, and many never return. Every person who leaves is a real loss for a community of only 240. The island now has internet, satellite television, and mobile phones, slow and limited compared to the rest of the world, but enough to stay connected. Technology has arrived on Tristan da Cunha, but it has not changed its soul. The same 7 family names, the same fishing boats, the same unlocked doors at night. Just 240 people living quietly on the most remote island on Earth. 240 people. 7 family names. 1 volcanic island in the middle of nowhere. They survived being forgotten. They survived being evacuated. They survived everything the ocean, the volcano, and the world threw at them. And still, they stayed. In a world where everyone is connected to everything, the people of Tristan da Cunha made a choice that most of us will never fully understand. They chose simplicity over comfort, community over convenience, home over everything else. And maybe that is the real lesson of this island. That home is not just a place on a map. It is something you fight for, something you return to, something you build generation after generation with your own hands. The world forgot about Tristan da Cunha many times, but the people of Tristan da Cunha never forgot about themselves. And as long as those 7 family names remain on that island, that they never will. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe. We cover the most extraordinary places on Earth every week. And drop a comment below. Would you want to live on Tristan da Cunha? See you in the next one.